So, Rod, I hope I'm not breaching any confidence to say that you may have some knowledge of
yes.
Our absent friend.
Craig is actually a client of ours and former alumni. He's, as you heard, the GC of Thomas Cook, who we're part of their panel, and actually has been quite interested in receiving regular MI from us. So I did have a good chat with some of the partners that are working closely with him, try and understand why he sees that as important, but also more broadly, it'd be interesting if we were to ask the room how many people are providing clients MI now. I suspect had we asked that question 5 years ago, there wouldn't have been many hands. I'd be interested today, how many people providing clients with MI? So actually still not very many. I suspect we're going to see more of this, particularly with the growth of panels. And another factor that we've heard a lot about, that GCs are being expected to deliver more for less. Well, the types of management in corporations employing very strong procurement professionals, those are the people that are holding GCs and other leaders in the firm's feet to the fire to demonstrate how they are actually managing their suppliers well. And I think one of the things that we've heard from our clients is not only do they have to do that, because they need to generate more, if you like, bang for buck to be able to deliver the services they need to do. They also need to demonstrate it internally. So by actually providing them with that information, it makes their life easier for a number of reasons. First of all, I think the obvious one, by providing, particularly for a GC like Craig, where we might have 8 or 10 open files with Thomas Cook, not all necessarily procured through him directly, but perhaps through members of his team. He immediately has an oversight of where the clock is ticking or where there are future commitments. So that helps him sort of manage his his budgets and actually see stuff that is going on that he may not know is going on in his organization, in a large organization. That can help prevent nasty surprises, of course. And then I think the second point is that he can actually start to use it, unfortunately, against firms like ourselves to be able to say, right, I'm getting more value over here. I mean, one of the things that he's interested to see is how much discount is he getting from our standard rates. Part of the panel discussion was a commercial discussion, and he's looking to drive value from that relationship. In terms of quantitative savings, but also a set of other things. And when we come on and talk about why is this actually useful for us as law firms, I'll talk about some of the benefits that I see us from this relationship.
Okay. Natalie, why don't you give us your perspective on your marketplace and where you are providing MI and business intelligence into your market?
Okay. Well, I too am a qualified accountant.
Oh, no.
So there's two really boring people on the panel. But this was, before I worked at DWF, I came from places like Barclays, like Jaguar Land Rover. I'd done a lot of analysis and MI and done a lot of work in finance departments. Can work, Excel and all of those tools. But when I came into the legal market, for me, it was quite surprising at how far behind the legal market was in general in terms of producing what I would call now business intelligence. They didn't even produce really very good MI, never mind business intelligence. What I thought would be interesting for people today is I'm sure that there aren't that many people in the room who are dealing with a lot of insurance clients on a day-to-day basis. DWF have been historically known as an insurance firm. We now are 50-50, so we do 50% commercial services, which I now run, and 50% insurance. And when I first came into the firm, nearly 6 years ago, we were very different, and I looked at the whole firm and did MI across the whole firm at first. And in terms of insurance, they're light years ahead of commercial services. They are massively they're massive data consumers. That data, as far as they're concerned, is theirs. Big data for insurance is something insurance could talk to you about, whereas commercial services at the moment, they pretty just want to know their financial performance. How are you financially performing versus maybe other people on the panel firms? So if I think about, we now do at least 20 clients in commercial services we provide MI for, but 75% of those clients, we can get it from our systems. There's no fee and intervention. We can just grab that data and produce those MI reports. In insurance, some of our clients will ask for a subsequent 30 to 60 fields worth of data that they want us to provide on top of what is provided through our systems. So historically, we've had to find the way of overcoming that challenge. How do we go and provide and capture another 30 to 60 fields? So historically, we've used case management systems. How do those workflows and case management capture that data in the background? We've set up internal administration teams. So how can file opening capture a lot of that data at the front end to take it away from the challenge of keeping the fee earner busy on working rather than producing MI for us? Data quality is everything we talk about today, whether it's internal MI or client MI. The biggest thing you have to think about is credibility. It's got to be a credible report. And therefore, if you haven't data cleansed and you've got crap data, you'll get a crappy output. That's just the fact of the matter. And as soon as your client or a partner in your business sees that that data isn't credible, the report is dead. You know, the trust in terms of what you're trying to run on your metrics or how you're trying to run the business dies along with that report, and the credibility pretty much of your team, etc., in terms of right first time. So in terms of insurance, we've got these very hungry clients, and we've had to very quickly think about, well, actually, how much money are we going to invest in how we capture data? And technology, everything we've talked about today, I think, at the whole conference has talked about how technology can move law firms on and who's going to be at the forefront of that technology. You know, our head of business improvement last week was talking to IBM about data scraping tools. How do we, on client instructions, scrape data so that we don't have to use case management systems and workflows on every single thing that we do to be able to capture the right information at the front end? So it's trying to constantly think about how to evolve. Commercial services will catch up because what the insurance services do and the client MI that we have to provide to them, pretty much on all of our big insurance clients, with no exceptions, is they want to have strategic conversations. So we have a business intelligence team. We don't want that team to spend all their time producing MI. We want that team to lay a value on top of that MI. So I want to be able to talk to Neil about why his Reddish office has got more claims on slips, trips and falls. And actually, after a strategic conversation, we dig into it, it's an issue with the cleaners that we use in Redditch, and they're not the same contractors. It's just a very simple example of you having a business-to-business conversation with your clients and allowing yourself the ability to do that. It's about employee claims, so we might have free employee helplines. Why are we getting more grievances from one area of the business for our clients than others, and being able to help them to understand their business more? We tended to find that clients will have different requirements. So some clients will have an analysis team at the client. So you might think about the banks, etc. They might just want a data dump, a data extraction. They don't want a fancy MI report. They have their own analysis team, and they'll then analyse that data how they want to. They might have a very strict format, so we found that with some of the banks, that you will fill in these fields and give us a report that looks like this, because we have limited resource and we need to compare all our panel firms against each other. The best situation for you as you go forward is that they have no format. It means that you can lead the conversation. You can create standard packs for different types of sectors or different types of clients, which allow you to talk from an innovation perspective about why a client might want MI from your firm, how that adds value to them, and how you can have more strategic business-to-business conversations. We had a conversation with The Economist. The Economist did a presentation on big data, and everyone keeps talking about the buzz of big data. But big data really is prioritising what you do with your data. Don't get lost in massive data sets, because you can get that paralysis by analysis. You know, we talked today about how much MI you could produce in a law firm. People can only focus on so much, and clients can only focus on so much. So prioritise what they focus on and how you can sell yourself in terms of the value of what you do for that client. So for our insurance clients, I want them to know for every £1 that they've spent with us, how much have we saved them in overall claims and third-party costs, and how we do the work. So if we put more investment up front on a job, and it costs more up front, but overall we can show that we're delivering a lower cost over that whole piece of work, we're delivering value to the client. It's not just about a pricing piece, about being the cheapest. It's about being the best in terms of the service you provide as well. So our metrics are changing all the time in terms of what we do for insurance clients. And that echoes everything we've talked about today in terms of business process efficiency. You can't do all of the things we've talked about today if you can't measure your performance. You can think your processes are efficient, but how are you going to measure whether they're efficient or not? And how do you sell that to the client? So try not to boil the ocean. Try and think about where you are in your journey as a business. And we are all businesses. We're not just partnerships. And then think about which bits of MI are going to deliver the most value for you as a business and for your clients.
Natalie, can I just pick up a point here? You're working now in the commercial side of DWF.
Yeah.
Which I'm guessing does law...
Everything else that everyone else will understand.
That is historically not been case managed and has not had that kind of process built into it.
Yeah.
Are you seeing, because perhaps of the dominant culture of your firm, that you are able to drive a process approach into that commercial work, perhaps because clients are demanding management information about statuses, trends, attributes of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, and because we've seen what's been delivered in insurance, how the market has moved and the demand for change, we see an opportunity with that as well. But it was interesting because I echo something someone else said before. Don't try and knock down and rebuild processes on everything you do, because you'll do nothing. You'll be trying to do so many different things, you'll get nowhere. If you do specific pilots where you have partner engagement and you know that you can deliver extra value to the client because it's got some client demand attached to it, it's an awful lot easier to do it quickly and be focused and get some output from changing that particular piece of work you do in commercial services. I mean, in insurance, we've got hundreds of paralegals, hundreds of them. And in commercial services, a lot less because it's an evolving beast in terms of how you're trying to process re-engineer. But we will do both at the same time. Where we process engineer, we'll set our new KPIs for that business. So DPU is a really good example. All our DPU are home workers. Now, the partners don't have to worry about whether
DPU, presumably your document production people.
Yeah, document production units. So where people have moved away from secretarial and people are doing dictation, etc. Partners just want them to do the dictation. I need to be able to work out for commercial services. Are those people productive or should I outsource? I can't do it without MI where I can measure productivity. So my KPIs, again, are based on productivity of the level and service of dictation that these people can do and the fact that they cost me less because they work at home. So you just have to think about the bits of your business that you want to focus on and manage and make a decision on, but make sure that those KPIs are very different operationally than the historical how much have you billed. And clients don't care about how much time unless you are on hourly rates. If you look at the shift in the marketplace, how many people are consistently getting more hourly rates tomorrow than they did yesterday? It's mostly fixed fee that's going forward. Clients don't care how much time you spend on fixed fee. It's all about the total cost and value and benefits provided from that piece of service of work. So you have to think about different metrics. It's not just client doesn't want to know about time as much as they want to know about productivity and service.
Absolutely. Neil, let's get your technology perspective on what you are seeing in the market. Who's buying what products to deliver what stuff into the market with regard to MI?
Bad news, I'm a techie, so we've got a completely boring panel. Gosh, what products? I almost hesitate to start naming products because that's kind of
you probably would quite like to name some LexisNexis products.
Well, Aardvark thingy.
Yeah.
I was actually going to, if I may, pick up on some of what Natalie was talking about, because when you're in the tech fraternity, what you're looking for is a specific challenge to meet and produce a solution. And probably the biggest challenge that people like me experience over and over again is that the challenge is non-specific and it's ever moving and changing. I, not so very long ago, dealt with a large firm, not yours, Natalie, but doing very similar work, a number of insurance clients with, you used the word a hunger for management information, and ended up in a discussion with the folks there about the fact that, or rather the idea that if you were running a restaurant and what you did was serve whatever meal at whatever time of day anyone happened to ask for, that would be a hugely expensive operation. and you'd run the risk of disappointing people when you didn't have the stock. And the restaurant business has long since figured out that offering a menu is a good idea with a price. And there followed a great debate about the extent to which it would be possible to offer, essentially as part of a service to larger clients, a menu of stuff, which would have two effects. One would be that you knew their business because you had a menu that made sense to them, and the other aspect was that there was a price attached to what was being served up. That idea got a little bit of traction, but the trouble is it takes a bit of bottle to convert from the you can have whatever you want kind of attitude, which of course big clients can force on firms. But nevertheless, there is a willingness there to try to adapt, because the discussion of the restaurant model actually seemed to hit home, because a lot of folk hadn't figured previously just what it was that was going on, and why it was that their operations side was actually extremely expensive, because that firm had a team of 12 people permanently in the area of business intelligence, which was a little IT island separate from the finance systems people, separate from the core of IT, and that in itself brought into play all sorts of frictions about data architecture, methodology, tools used, you name it. One of the things that firm did, though, which I thought was extremely smart, and it sounds a bit like your firm, Natalie, was to have worked very hard on figuring out the difference between pure management information and business intelligence. If I characterize the difference between the two with two real-world examples, I did have some discussions with a major high street bank not so very long ago, the IT people that is, about the management information that they demanded from their various supplier firms. And top of their list was, how much have we spent with you? And that was for the simple reason that they didn't know, so they had to be told, which is extraordinary, but true. That, to my mind, is information. On the other hand, if you go to the other end of the spectrum, what Natalie was talking about in terms of trips and slips and the like, although in the case of the firm I was dealing with, they had some brilliant analytic capability in the area of looking for fraudulent claims, that is worth its weight in gold to insure. And that, to my mind, is figuring out genuine intelligence that has a value, which when served up properly makes them very different from some of their competitors.
Neil, can I just interject and ask you a question here? Historically, it has felt to me like the technology that was available was capable of helping us to produce insights of the type that Natalie described, only in circumstances where you've got a large number of quite similar things.
Yes.
A law firm like DLA Piper or Latham is also doing a large number of not very similar things. We've got 50 million documents in our document management system, a billion emails,
well, I agree.
Millions of time recording entries. So one of the technology challenges, I think, is what could you do in the technology space to help firms to unlock business intelligence from that unstructured data, the big data, the Tesco club card type data?
I generally spend my time trying to explain that there are certain things that make sense to the running of a firm as a whole, regardless of the mix of practice areas. However, if you're in charge of a practice group, be prepared for it's different here versus there versus there. I mean, Natalie talks about DWF now being a 50-50 mix and insurance specialist. I'm willing to bet that what goes on is not the same thing everywhere by any manner or means. It's characterized by the nature of the work that's carried out and characterized by the nature of the clients. And I'm probably old enough now to have people listen to me when I say, for God's sake, don't talk about a law firm. There is no such thing as a law firm as a homogenous, repeatable organization. There are areas of law, and many law firms are actually amalgams of or federations of almost different businesses in their nature. And that's one of the challenges with talking about business intelligence. Now, I believe there's stuff at the top, which is fundamentally financial, about return on investment, production cost, that sort of thing. And I would venture to say, when you were asking the questions earlier, Daniel, consideration given to things like capacity planning and availability and resource skills and experience and that kind of thing, which I hardly see done at all, but is really very normal in other industries. So there's a slice of stuff, I think, at the top that makes sense, regardless of type of law. But once you get below that, it's going to vary. Be prepared for it to vary quite considerably. And therein lies the challenge. If a BI vendor approaches a firm and says, what you want is this QB thing that does this visualization, they could be missing the mark by a long way as far as large parts of the firm are concerned without even realizing it. Because it's a bit like turning up with a spade, saying you can dig a hole of any size, where should we start? That doesn't really fit. One of the most successful, albeit perhaps not so much in this country, vendor operations with BI actually didn't major on the technology at all. It was backed or originally founded by a group who were in their past investment bankers, and they'd taken the trouble to figure out the kinds of metrics that would make sense if they had invested in a law firm that they would want to see. Interesting way of looking at it. And they turn out to be one of the more successful propositions, certainly in the States. And I think that's the trouble. If I'm in a room being asked about business intelligence, I have to say, right, I'm going to have to take the tech hat off, put a business hat on, and try and go along with you or lead you somewhere, which is a bit weird because it's your business that we're talking about. And there's the tech challenge.
Well, okay, let's see if we can get some insight by looking internally at DWF and Latham or a fictional law firm that might bear some resemblance to your firms. We'll start with Rod, but I'd like both of you to give some perspective on where you're going with your internal management information and business intelligence and take that in whatever direction
Just
you wish.
before we do that, can I just pick up on one thing that Natalie said, that just to close the loop on the client side, because I think it actually presents an opportunity for law firms like ours as well. The initial reaction from a partner when the client says, I need reports on what you're doing and so on, is, oh no, we've got to provide this. Actually, you can really use that to your benefit in two ways. One, as a marketing tool. And one of the things that we found is there are a set of inputs to that client relationship and a set of outputs. Inputs are much easier to measure, but they're not just the hours that are spent working on client files or even the discounts or rebates that you're giving. Very often you're providing other things that they don't necessarily value in the same way. So for example, secondments that you may do at cost. No, actually that is providing value to the client. Seminars that you're inviting them to, KM that they may benefit from, training, CPD. All of this can add up to quite a big picture of value that the law firm is providing to that client that they may not necessarily be thinking about. And as such, can be really used as a marketing tool to demonstrate how that can benefit the client. The other nice thing, of course, is when a client asks for that, particularly when they want to know how much is on the clock on a regular basis, it avoids those nasty surprises at the end, particularly when you're in a bill at close type environment and you've got to send a big invoice to the client. Big, deep breath before you do that. Actually, when they know that, that they can come to expect that, it just avoids some of those more awkward conversations. So, whilst it can be seen as a hassle, I can definitely recommend that it can be also used as a positive thing for law firms. Okay. So sorry to...
No problem. So
let's switch on to internal.
Look internally now for a few minutes.
Yeah. So, what's interesting, I think, is, and one of the things we were asked to talk about is making management information actionable. Well, I think one of the things we first of all have to consider is what level of organization are we trying to ask for action, and let's make sure that the information is directed appropriately. I mean, for example, is that information specific enough to be able to act on? And all too often, we'll see trends or we'll see nice charts that are interesting, that tell you a story about the state of the firm, which is important in itself because it may demonstrate the firm's being well managed or that you've got your eye on the ball, but ultimately isn't actionable. And I think to make it actionable, a couple of things need to happen. One, it needs to be targeted at the right people. So let's know our audience and know what they need to have to be able to take action. Let's also be very clear, what is the message we're trying to get across to that audience? And I'm afraid all too often, you'll see management information that's going out that you're actually struggling to understand, what does this tell me? And particularly, a lot of lawyers are not numbers people, actually. And if you send them a lot of numbers and they're kind of, well, actually, what does this tell me? What do I need to do with this? That's, in a way, a barrier to taking action from the outset. So make it understandable. Make the message jump off the page. Ask someone to look at that. Do you know what this is telling you? The next thing I would say is think about, does this tell me something that I can then go and act on? For example, if you're looking at utilization of a team as a trend, yeah, that may tell me that things have gone in the right direction. But do I need more information to actually do something about that? For example, the reason that utilization may not be where you want it to be is a certain number of people are not being effectively utilized. Well, therefore, let's tell people, okay, so these 5 people are not going to hit their year-end utilization targets as it currently stands. That's much more actionable than just looking at that more generic information. So make it focused, targeted, make sure the message jumps off the page. Don't clutter information. This is another point. You'll see reports, financial reports, with hundreds of thousands of dollars or pounds, or whatever they are, and they'll be continuing on to the decimal point. So it'll be 467,573.23. I mean, what can you do with that information? Keep it concise. 467,000 is all you need. So, put a commercial mindset into the way you deliver that rather than an accountant approach. And I think, particularly with lawyers, it'll resonate better.
Natalie, let's take your...
Well, I've got a good example of that. When I first arrived 5.5 years ago, I was obviously interested in the financials, being an accountant, and said, what do you look at in your monthly board meeting in terms of financials? And they said, we look at our management accounts, and the pack was enormous, just pages and pages of data. I said, you can't possibly get through all of that information in a meeting. Well, we try and skim through it and talk about any pertinent points. So I went back to the managing partner, a couple of weeks later and said, here's a one-pager of how the business is doing. It's just a heat map, something I'd used before in lots of organisations I'd worked in outside the legal sector. And, they couldn't believe it. They were like, red's bad, amber's okay, green's good. So maybe focus on the reds to start off with. And they could just look at it in 5 minutes, and they all started to just carry around this one page around the business with them. And I think it just goes to show that you don't have to do something really complicated to really help people within the business. I did that on Excel, and I suppose one of my top tips is, if you're going to do something on Excel, make sure it doesn't look like it's on Excel, because most of the partners it's a complicated tool, let's face it. I don't like Word. Partners don't like Excel. I've been working in Excel for 15 years, and I probably use 50% capacity of what the tool can do. I understand how complicated it is. So that would be a tip to take away. They hate it, and it's complicated for people, and they can make mistakes in it if it's not protected, etc. It's a minefield. But you don't have to have, I'm going to give you an example of what we had to do because we merged, as you probably know, with so many firms in such a short space of time. So we had a burning platform, as we've talked about today. We had to extract data from 6 operating platforms to get a set of month-end MI. It was an absolute nightmare. The guys in finance just sat there for the whole all they did was reporting. And of course, there's a lot of manual error in that. When you've got human intervention trying to extract data and then convert that data into something meaningful, it's time-consuming, but it's full of potential errors. And I said to the managing partner, I don't believe that this data is right. It can't possibly be, from a human perspective, right. So we went and talked to lots of different software companies about actually bringing in a piece of software just for business intelligence. We needed software that would look and be able to extract data from multiple different data sources, so lots of different operating platforms. I also wanted something flexible enough so it could look at something like Excel. So if I wanted to have a table of rates or something outside of a system, I wanted an overarching software platform that could pull that for me from lots of different sources. And I had to make sure we had control. So if anyone's thinking of a new software tool, another tip is make sure you have control. Make sure that every time you don't want to change a report, you don't have to go back to the consultant, because it's time consuming and it's very expensive. And it means that actually you've not got a very flexible tool because you're constantly having to bring an expert in all the time to help you tweak, change. And true business intelligence should evolve with your business. It should constantly evolve. So you should need to change your reports every year and create different reports on areas of your business. So that was a key one for me because we'd been stuck with operating platforms in the past where we couldn't physically change our own MI without a consultant. And make sure you just pick the right one for you as a business that provides you with all the things that you want. It's worth putting that investment in at the beginning. So we chose a tool that could do all of those things, and then we went about on the project of how to incept it. The hardest thing is data cleansing and mapping. It's boring and it's time consuming, and you've got to put resource and effort into it. But if you don't do it, your reports will never work because your data won't be cleansed, it won't be right, it won't be clean, it won't be credible. You won't be able to map everything to the right place. And that's really where your investment should be, because if you think about future-proofing yourself in terms of internal MI, and it depends, you will all be on a different life cycle of what you think you need as a business and what you want to invest in and how much time and energy you want to spend on this. But actually, if you are starting on a journey or you're already on that journey, if you can map everything at the lowest level in terms of the lowest level of detail within a database, I'm talking a bit techie now, it just means that whenever you want to do a report on the top, the data's there and it's all mapped together. You're not having to think, I want this new report. Oh, I never mapped that data. I'm going to have to go back and get somebody to do that groundwork all over again. So I would advise putting that groundwork in at the front. And then as you go through, it's all about thinking about, well, how do you want to measure your new business going forward? So we had lots of different businesses, all used to be measured in slightly different ways. We had to bring management together to say, if we're not going to get management support for these KPIs of how we're going to run our business, it's pointless, because if it doesn't prompt action, why spend so much time on it? Keep your KPIs simple. I totally agree with that. Don't over-egg your pudding, or don't boil the ocean. People just want to know how you're going to measure them and what's important to them. So that kind of one-page philosophy on keeping it simple really helps the partners and helps you run the business. But you have to be really clear on what's important to you in your business life cycle and how do you want to measure it. And therefore, that's how you put your MI together in terms of providing business intelligence for you internally and operationally. And don't underestimate the people impact. So whenever we want to change workflows or KPIs or reporting, we need to communicate with people. So when we launched this new tool, which was self-service, so the beauty of it is I can see how many partners access the report, how long they spend in the report, and how many clicks they have into the report. So I can see who's managing their own business and who are the technophobes who will never open a self-service from that report. And they're everywhere. We don't have lots of kind of 25-year-old social media geeks who just love MI on a day-to-day basis. But we do have some really good business managers who see the value of this, and we've made a real effort to sell the value of the new tool and how they can access it. We've also cut down all our reporting for 10 days, and we can now get all of our month-end the day after the month-end closes with a lot of information sitting underneath it. Try to create different reports for different purposes. So we do client profitability on a separate report that only goes to partners or is only available to partners. I don't need a solicitor to worry about whether a partner's client is profitable or not in certain circumstances, but there are other things I want solicitors to focus on. So think about who you want to focus on what in your organisation, and maybe think about how to keep that report simple. And if you need another report, keep that simple and focused and to the point. So I would also say in a project of that magnitude where you've got a big IT investment and you're trying to change the way that you report in terms of your business, think about breaking down the parts of your project management. So one of the things we needed to do was to try and get this new element of MI out quickly. So we went for fewer KPIs. So we would have liked 9 on our dashboard. We went out on first phase with 4. Because they were struggling with debtor days or the calculations of how it works in terms of the machinations, whereas it was really easy for them to get billing, gross margin, total hours. So focus on the easy stuff and get it out, because you can get people to start using it and not have to wait until you've got 100% perfection. And when I talk to lots of other firms about their client profitability reports or their matter profitability, we had to start from, I built all my pricing tools and client profitability, and then we merged with 5 firms. And nobody had client profitability and matter profitability, so I had to kind of get all that data and recreate all of those reports again. Well, not me personally, I don't do any of this stuff anymore, but you get my drift. And then educating the whole of the partnership all over again. But just think about what data needs to go into there and what you're trying to achieve with those reports. And I went and did lots of research with other people, you know, how do you do standard costing? Do you do it all the way down to net margin? Do you just do gross margin? And I was staggered by how many people don't do any client profitability reporting at all, hadn't bothered with standard costing. And a couple of firms I'd spoken to who tried to do client profitability had made it so complicated, the project just fell over. It just got canned in the end because they tried to do so much and they'd made it too complicated and they'd gone down to net profit. But the partners were never used to being measured down to net profit. They didn't understand it and they started arguing about why they were paying for so many more BD. I don't use BD. Don't give me that BD. I don't use BD and different parts of the firm. Well, I'm in a cheaper office. I shouldn't have to pay for London office. I'm in the Manchester office. You know, there's certain conversations you don't need to have with people in terms of getting the best out of your business. So strip it out and go back to your basics. So that would have, chunking down the project and delivering simple KPIs that were easy and people can digest and then building onto it. So we started off with 4 and within 4 months we'd got all 9 on the dashboard. But it was a lot easier because the project team would finish their 4 and then they could just focus on the next dashboard of the next bit of the dashboard and the next bit. Doing all of them, all 9 at the same time, the team was struggling in terms of doing it all. So I just cut things out, made it simple, tried to produce something. So I would advocate that approach on project management because I'm sure you don't get a lot of support on project management, I'm guessing, across the whole of your businesses. So try and use where you have got project management or you are, like me in that circumstance, the project manager. Try and make it a little bit easier on yourself or the people who are doing that role.
I would just pick up one lesson from DLA Piper's journey on partner-facing management information, which I know is not the full story. Making sure that you've got one version of the truth is very important because once a partner can identify more than one version of the truth, they then pursue that argument to say, therefore, there is no truth and therefore none of this should be actioned. Now, that's a very negative view and that's certainly not indicative of all partners, but certainly if you are trying to drive certain metrics in the right direction, some people will be delighted to show that the data's wrong. So getting to one version of the truth has been a really important thing for us in DLA Piper, and that's why we try very hard, fail candidly in some senses, we try very hard not to be sending out bespoke billing, profitability, blah, blah, blah reports on request. We try to say, it's in GFI, please action the data that's in there, and don't get someone local to produce a conflicting report.
Yeah, no, if I could add to that, because I've seen the same phenomenon, if there's more than one version of the truth, people will argue about the numbers, and you'll end up actually spending the time having a numbers conversation rather than actually what should we be doing with the numbers type of conversation. Yeah. So it's very destructive.
Yeah. So Neil, this is your opportunity to tell us how you're going to help to solve all of these problems.
Well, I would, regardless of product, there's a common strategic approach that I would recommend. Most law firms have many systems, and when you merge, you have many, many systems. Personally, I wouldn't target any of the individual applications for any of this stuff. I'd implement a strategy based on master data or warehouse, call it what you will, neutral zone, into which you harvest, and using harvesting tools that are sufficiently versatile to harvest lots of stuff from lots of places. If you go to a finance system, you can run off a list of debtors. Pretty sure most firms also have credit control systems, and I'm pretty sure that if you ran off a list of debtors, you get 2 different answers, even if it's just because of point in time difference. So there's a classic illustration of the sort of thing that was being talked about. The one version of the truth comes from it being one source, in my opinion. So I'd think in terms of harvesting from multiple sources into a common zone that's built for the purpose. I'd be careful about things like timing. You get fanatics talking about, I want real-time reports. Often when you drill into that, just sheer common sense says, well, as of last night should be good enough if it's management or intelligence that you're talking about. And then you're into the territory of the delivery medium. And the delivery medium might be a DIY intranet style, it might be a Cognos or a SSAS stuff or whatever. And that has a very great deal to do with the consumers. You deliver to suit the consumer. So I'm afraid it's not very complicated, but I think in terms of harvesting into a neutral zone and then delivery tools that are suitable for the consumers. I'm trying to stay away. I'm trying to
from
be
the technology itself,
agnostic. The other thing I was going to say was that we're all familiar with from years past the sort of management report pack that you were talking about, Natalie, where it's 900 pages worth of stuff that gets used as a doorstop. And that, to my mind, is the classic old-fashioned idea of management information. The more I get, the better informed I must be, which of course is nonsense. It's interesting, the difference between the word information and the word intelligence, to my mind, is that intelligence has an element of why as well as what. Information is fundamentally, in my opinion, what. Intelligence is creeping toward the why, which makes something that much more actionable. And in order to get to that form of intelligence, it's always been, when I've seen it done, a matter of having to aggregate information that's in different places, which brings you back to get it all in one place if you can. So, for example, if you were looking at profitability of a team and it wasn't very good, it begs the question why. But if you were to add to that some seasoning of the nature of their clients, the nature of the work, other facets of that team perhaps as a team, the fact that they're overqualified to do what they're doing, then you're getting some way on toward intelligence which is actionable. And you can really only do that if you're going to scoop up data, sort of old-fashioned word, information, whatever, from multiple sources. I think a much underused repository is the HR system, which is a bit bizarre in a business where our, if I may borrow a phrase from Lawrence Milstead, who's FD at Freshfields, there are production units who produce an output at a cost, and it's, I believe, an area that's ripe for more work being done to bring in that facet of information and place it alongside the operational results, if you will. But in order to do that, you've got to be able to get your arms around all the stuff that you have. And then, as Natalie says, you've got to be able to do things like straightening out disparities in taxonomies, cleansing stuff, getting rid of rubbish, the inevitable duplications, the misrepresentation of you name it, all of that's there. I have had the experience of presenting an intranet to a law firm. This is a long time ago. I won't name the firm, and we showed a list of clients for a partner, and the partner happened to be in the room. He said, "Well, that's rubbish. I mean, that says this matter was opened in 1742." Where did you get that? I said, "Well, actually, directly from your system." So, and then you get the Sir Humphrey argument. Minister, there's an error on page 17, therefore the entire report should be discarded and you're in trouble. So single source gives you the potential to go one version of truth. Harvesting from multiple places means it's like a shock absorber when you merge and you get different systems, and you can extend your reach over time. And I completely agree that the fewer, more meaningful KPIs and intelligence, the better, because folk can't absorb many more things than a few. And wasn't it Arnold Weinstock? I don't know, it's probably apocryphal, who only ever used one KPI, which was how much is in the bank.
Yeah, cash. Indeed. Thank you. I hope you'll join me in the usual way and thank our panellists for the very interesting session.